Hey folks, how we doing? Let's talk a little bit about, what is this, 10.1, 10.1, 10.1. They introduce a concept of a type 1 and type 2 error. I did a little writing beforehand. So the type 1 error, we have some definitions. We're going to simplify these in a second. But just memorize these for right now. Dictionary definition of a type 1 error is rejecting the null hypothesis when the null hypothesis is actually true. And the dictionary definition of a type 2 error is not rejecting the null hypothesis when the null hypothesis is actually false. The definition in 10.1 is slightly different. They'll talk about the alternative being true. Most books present it this way. Just be comfortable with both ways. We'll come back to this in a second. Okay, so here's our example to introduce us to the idea. In the U.S. justice system, we are innocent until proven guilty. So our null hypothesis is that the defendant is innocent. The alternative hypothesis is that they're guilty. And sometimes, as we've seen in movies or real life, mistakes are made, errors are made. So let's say in reality someone is innocent and the jury says they're innocent. Well, that's a good, correct decision. And if in reality someone is guilty and the jury says they're guilty, that also is a correct decision. So there's two types of mistakes or errors that can be made. And what you need to do first is realize that they're different. So let's see, what if someone is innocent, but yet the jury says they're guilty? So that would be like sending an innocent person to the electric chair, locking an innocent person up in jail for their whole life. So that might be like the movie, you're probably all too young, Shawshank Redemption. Innocent guy gets thrown in jail. Okay. The other situation is in reality the person is guilty, but the jury says they're innocent. So that might be, I don't know, maybe OJ or something. Okay. Again, notice how, technically speaking, in our legal system, we never find someone innocent. We find them not guilty. You're either guilty or not guilty. But I just use the word innocent to oversimplify the idea. Okay, so you can argue over which one is worse, but most of us would probably say the worst situation is sending an innocent person to the electric chair, or innocent person locking them up forever. So we would call this one a type 1 error, and therefore the other situation must be a type 2 error. So in our justice system, the type 1 error would be saying that someone is guilty even though in reality they're innocent. Okay, so let's compare this. So this was just to introduce the idea that errors can be different. So if we go back to our definition, the type 1 error, rejecting the null when the null is actually true. So notice, in order to play the game, the null and alternative must be stated in the beginning. Either you set this up and they'll give you enough words so you can set it up correctly, or they'll straight up give it to you. Okay, so rejecting the null. So here's the null. If you reject it, you're saying someone's guilty when the null is actually true. So you're saying someone's guilty even though they're innocent. Aha. So the jury says they're guilty even though in reality they're innocent. Ha, that's a type 1 error. So if we were to oversimplify this definition, so here's our dictionary definition, but when people ask us what's the type 1 and type 2 error, so a good little trick is the type 1 error is if you're going to reject the null, essentially what you're therefore doing is saying the alternative, saying the H1. I often put HA, alternative hypothesis HA. Our book uses H1, same thing. Okay, so saying H1, rejecting the null, so that's saying the alternative, when the null is actually true. So even though HO. So saying the alternative even though the null is true. So saying H1 even though HO. So then the type 2 is just switching them. Not rejecting the null. Not rejecting the null means you're stuck with it. So saying HO even though H1. Okay, well that's confusing. Maybe an example will clarify things. So we have, here's a situation teachers face. The null, we'll assume that the student is not cheating. The alternative is that the student is cheating. So think of what could happen as a teacher. You could accuse someone of cheating, but it turns out they really weren't cheating. Or you could think they're cheating, but you don't accuse them of cheating, and thus they got away with cheating. So both are mistakes. One is a type 1 error, one is a type 2 error. Okay, so maybe pause right now and try and write down what you think the type 1 error is and what the type 2 error is. And you didn't pause. Okay, so the type 1 error we said is saying H1 even though HO. So let me write that down. Saying H1 even though HO. So we're saying H1, saying student cheated, saying the student cheated, are saying the student cheated even though they did not cheat, even though they didn't, even though they did not. Okay. So time for a new pen. So let's do the same thing for the type 2 error. I'm going to write down my little trick. So that's my little trick, right? For type 1 error, someone says, hey, what's the type 1 error? I go, well, let me write down my key, saying H1 even though HO. Okay, now let me just substitute in. Saying H1. What was H1? Student is cheating. So saying the student cheated even though HO. They were not cheating. They did not. Okay. So type 2 error. Ooh, that's a good pen. Saying HO even though H1. Saying the null even though the alternative. Okay. So saying HO. What's HO? That they did not cheat. Saying they did not cheat even though H1. Even though the student is cheating. Even though they did cheat. Aha. So as a teacher, there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than a type 1 error, to accuse someone of cheating even though they did not. So if I ever accuse you, I'm usually really, really sure you cheated. I don't want to make a type 1 error. Okay. Let's do a couple more examples. Soda machine. So a soda machine is supposed to fill up cans to 12 ounces. So the null is the soda machine's fine. Soda machine's fine. It's working great. It's filling up to 12 ounces. The alternative is that the soda machine is broken. It's not filling 12 ounces. Okay, so same game. What would be the type 1 error? And what would be the type 2 error? So imagine you are the head engineer at Coca-Cola. Seems like the machine's making a weird noise. Should I turn it off to see if it's broken and fix it? Well, if I turn it off and it's not broken, that's not good. Or if I don't turn it off and it turns out it really is broken, that's not good either. Those are both errors. Which one's type 1 and which one's type 2? Okay, so type 1 error. I'll write down my little shortcut. Oh, maybe you pause right now and try it on your own? Saying blank even though blank? No, you don't want to pause? Fine, okay. Saying, so the type 1 is saying H1, the alternative, even though HO. Okay, so saying H1, saying the machine's broken. Broken, even though HO, even though it's fine. Even though it's fine, it's working great, it's fine. Ooh, penmanship. Okay, type 2 error, so that would be saying HO, even though H1. Okay, so HO, saying the soda machine is fine. Saying the 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 machine is working fine. Even though H1, even though it's broken. No, it's broken. Aha! Okay, starting to make more sense. You see how you have to be given the null and alternative, or you have to set up the null and alternative yourself. So type 1 and type 2 error actually pop up a lot in life. So decade or so ago, maybe more, it came up in sort of world events, politics. So null hypothesis, country X does not have WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. Alternative hypothesis, country X does have weapons of mass destruction. So imagine you are the USA and you want to go into a country to remove WMDs. So if you go there and they do not have WMDs, you made a mistake. Or on the other hand, if you don't go there and they do have them, then that would be a mistake. So there's two types of errors, generally speaking, you can make in life. Okay, so the type 1 error. Okay, so maybe, again, pause, try and see if you can get these on your own. No pause? Fine. Okay, so type 1 error is saying H1, saying the alternative, even though the null is true, even though HO. So type 1 error is saying country X has WMDs, even though the null, it does not. And the type 2 error is a little shortcut saying HO, even though H1. So that would be saying the null, they do not. Saying country X does not have WMDs, even though it does. Okay, so let's not get too political, but some people say that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction. Let's assume that to be true. The U.S. invaded Iraq to remove weapons of mass destruction, and let's just say they did not find any weapons of mass destruction. Let's just go with that premise. Who knows if it's true or not? Let's just go with it. So once again, we'll just go with this premise. USA invades country X or Iraq to remove WMDs. Turns out they did not have WMDs. Did the USA commit a type 1 error or a type 2 error? Ponder, ponder, ponder. So in that example, USA invading Iraq to remove WMDs. there were no WMDs in Iraq, so that would be saying country X has WMDs even though it does not. So that's what the USA-Iraq example would give us. That's the type 1 error. And our defense secretary at the time, do you recall who that was? History buffs? It was Donald Rumsfeld. Very smart guy. Try and watch his a documentary about him on Netflix, I think. I think it's called Known Knowns or Known Knowns or Unknown Unknowns. One of his famous quotes, there are known knowns, known unknowns, unknown unknowns, something like that. But anyhow, he always says things that are really smart and confuses people. He said he did not want to see a type 2 error on, so this is at the time, the decision to invade Iraq. He said, I do not want to see a type 2 error on American soil. In other words, he did not want to find out the hard way by not invading Iraq that they actually did have WMDs. So in the news, someone actually said type 2 error, Donald Rumsfeld. Okay, hopefully that made sense, folks. Peace.